Hi everyone, this is Pierrick from P2 Design. In this video I will show you how I've made the following animation. As some of you may know, I'm recording a new rigging course for Blender based on the character I've made in the last released course, Character Creation for Games. The goal will be to learn rigging through this character, but also through other more simple examples, so that pure beginners and more advanced users can learn rigging altogether. Enough self-promotion, let's get started. First thing I've done is to create a keying set where I return a key for each bone regarding its location, rotation or scale depending on the use I will have for this bone. So if a bone is not meant to rotate, I won't be writing any rotation information. I almost knew right from the beginning what kind of choreography I wanted to do. And to help me, I oftenly mimic the choreography, and I have a big mirror right in back of me just to check the pose of my character. So you have to act the pose as much as you can. I generally start animation with the blocking, meaning that I will set the main poses, the extreme as we call them. It's a moment where I don't care about the timing, so I will set all my keys every 5 frames. This is a very important step in the process of animation, because this is where you will give your character its main poses, where you will set the attitude. While we will be refining those during the polishing, it's very important here to get strong and clear poses. So watch out for your silhouette. This is why I already set a camera position so that I can read the silhouette of my character in this camera view. In this stage you want to avoid interpolation of the animation, so you should set all the key poses to constant. In this way you won't have any movement from one pose to the other. In this early stage, interpolation can be really annoying for the readability of your animation. Once all your poses are done, it's the right time to start working on retiming the animation, still in constant mode. This is also the time where I create in-between poses, which will help reading the animation and then splining it. The splining stage is where you switch your interpolation from constant to Bezier, and then you start working on your curves. But before I dive into curve editing, I generally edit some keys from specific bones like the feet and the lead torso. Those are very important bones that lead the main position of your character. Then during the curve editing you will be able to refine the motion of your character and give it a better gesture. In some cases curve editing is not enough, so I've edited the blade and hand motion frame by frame to achieve these parts of the animation. I've then animated facial expression. Final animation stage was to create all the follow-through animation like the cloth, but also the thigh plates, and I really enjoyed getting this pop effect whenever they fall down to give them more weight. For the camera framing, also known as staging, I've used a camera parented to an empty to make the first turntable rotation. Then I directly animated the camera backward with some fall off into the animation to get the surprise movements. I then added some noise to the camera to increase the shockwave effect when the character is attacking. For the ground I wanted the plane to blend with the background, so I created a plane, add the material, set it to alpha blend, and then mixed the principal BSDF with a dark color and no specularity with a transparent shader using a gradient texture. I set it to spherical, and to center it you have to offset the location of the UV coordinates by -0.5 on both X and Y axis. For the cherry blossom petals, I've just imported my previous particle system from the Crimson Ronin teaser. So it's just a plain emitting particles without gravity effect and some random rotation. I then added a collider to the ground, set the stickiness and damping to 1 so that the petals just stop whenever they hit the surface. And later on I've added a force field effect with an animated strength whenever the character is giving its strike and making the explosion. To create the blade, slash and trail effect, I've used 2 methods. The first one was to create a plane parented to the blade, subdivide it and then create a shape key that I will animate during the attack. I've then created a new material, set it to additive instead of opaque so that any dark area won't appear. Then I used a gradient texture to drive an emission shader and just played with a color ramp for the contrast. To make the slash in the front of the camera, I've used a simple plane that I've aligned with the camera. Then I've played with the contrast to get rid of the edges, resized the plane so that it much looked like a rebound, and finally animated the UV coordinate of the slash so that it follows the blade. For the shockwave effect, I've animated a simple sphere with a subdivision modifier, added an additive shader, used the layer weight node to drive a transparent shader mixed with an emission shader, and then multiply a position shader with the z-axis separated onto the color of the layer weight. It allows me to separate the shockwave from the ground. The divide node allows me to increase or decrease the fall. I then just animated the size of the sphere and the transparency of the shader. Since the slash effect made the animation a bit too stiff and we didn't get the nice curvature and flow of the blade, I've decided to add a second trace using a curve. This would allow me to fight against the lack of frames that would allow to see a very rounded movement. So I've been extruding a curve following the movement of the blade and trying to give the movement a very smooth shape. Then I've used the extrude function of the curve to give it a rebound shape and enable the automatic UVs. I've then animated the start and end value of the curve to create the trail effect. And guess what? Created a new material, used gradient texture, one spherical and one linear, that I've multiplied one on each other to create the rebound profile. The fact that I've enabled automatic UVs previously really helps a lot, and I just have to shape it. It will follow the end and start position of the curve automatically. Then I rapidly worked onto my lightning using a point light to get some rim light and used an HDRI for the main lightning. Added some bloom, some depth of field, and then render it out as a PNG sequence using Eevee. Then loaded everything inside of After Effects, added some color correction, some sharpness, some motion blur. I've made some eye tracking, some rotoscopy, some fading, added my logo, added some fancy catchphrase. I then made some audio editing to add some and some. And finally clicked on Export Render.